Over the years I've been asked quite a few times why I never feature old Bang & Olufsen HiFi in the videos. There's a few reasons for this. First one, really, I haven't had any experience of it myself. It never really appealed to me. I like hi-fis that are full of switches, dials, buttons, flashing VU meters or needles, whereas Bang & Olufsen go completely the other direction, and their stuff's supposed to look sleek, minimalist, ornamental, like a sculpture for the home. So it isn't really my kind of a thing. In addition, it was always way too expensive for me. I worked for 25 years just around the corner from a Bang & Olufsen shop, and I'd regularly pass it on my lunch break. And often there'd be things in the window there that I just didn't know what they were. A Beolab something or other. It looked like a spaceship. What does it do? I don't know. And then there was a price next to it, which was something I'd never be able to pay. So what's the point in even looking into it anymore? So my experience of Bang & Olufsen over the years has been, it's something in a shop for someone else that I don't really understand. But I thought more recently, perhaps, yeah, I should try and feature something on the channel. And I've recently been looking at a few different micro systems. I say recently, over the last couple of years, mini, micro, bookshelf, hi-fi systems. And I thought maybe I could feature something from Bang & Olufsen that was in that kind of area. From the days when they were still manufacturing things that were capable of playing physical media. Okay, so after a bit of shopping around, this is what I picked up. It's a Beosound 3200. It's a CD and AM/FM radio. The seller said that it had been serviced and was fully functional. And I remember seeing this model or something very similar to it on the TV show Nip Tuck. And when you put your hand in front of it, the glass doors open up and enable you to put your CD in here or press the buttons. Then they automatically close again after you've left it for a while. Now, there's quite a few different models that look similar to this with different features that they've done over the years. It's a design that lasted quite a long time. I believe this is the final iteration of it though, the 3200. And once I got this, I thought, right, well, that's it. I've got what I need now. I can make a video. I just need to connect up some speakers. No, it turns out it's not quite as easy as that, and I'll show you why. Once I had a look at the connections on the back, I realised that I'd miscalculated. So all the sockets are along this part here. We've got the AM antenna, the power input, the FM coax input. Over here, auxiliary input, that's a DIN plug. This is the master link connector, which would enable you to connect this up to other AV equipment from the B&O range. And here are my speaker connectors. It's listed as power link rather than speaker output. And again, we've got two DIN plugs. It turns out that this device doesn't have its own inbuilt amplifier. It works with amplified speakers that are connected up with these DIN plugs. So I can't just connect it to any of my regular speakers. I need to get some special Bang & Olufsen speakers to accompany this. And of course, the fact that I wasn't aware that the Bang & Olufsen device would use active speakers is purely down to my lack of knowledge of this range. So I'm learning as I'm going along here. I think it would be better, though, having the speakers that are intended to go with this rather than just attaching any old thing to it. After all, it's going to look a lot neater and it's going to give the performance that it was supposed to give. It's just I hadn't budgeted for that. So let me show you the speakers that I ended up buying. Okay, so these are the Beolab 2500, or is that 2500? I don't know how they refer to these, but as you can see, they're asymmetric speakers. This section here sticks out to one side. As a result, you'd place them either side of your central unit like so, obviously spaced a little bit further apart than this, and then it will give one nice uniform shape across the front. They're angled back, just like the main unit, and they connect up via DIN plugs, and they've also got their own power supplies here. So we need to power each of the speakers as well as the main unit, and connect all the things together. And therefore I had to go and get myself some more cables. So I looked on eBay for some suitable cables and came across these. They were being advertised for this range of components, although I don't believe they're Bang & Olufsen cables, but I can see they're decent quality. So if you just have a look here, you can see we've got a DIN plug on either end, and that connects the speaker with the main unit on either side. So That's the speaker connections sorted out. The next thing I had to do though was sort out the power connections. If you look in the online manual for this, you can see that the cables that would go between these three components all terminate in one power plug. It's split off in three different directions. Now I went looking for a power cable like that with three ends on it, and I couldn't find one. I'm sure somebody does one somewhere, and of course the official ones would no doubt be horrendously expensive, so I put together my own. Looks a little bit dodgy, but it's fine. Well, hopefully. So what we've got here, I could find these things that split out your power into two from an input. So that's an IEC-C7 into 2C8. So just your regular power cable that would go into most things goes into there. So of course now I've got two, but I need three. So then of course you put another one of these on one of those ends with a C7 on it and break that out into two C8s. But then that would have been too short to attach all three things together, so I've got a bit of an extension on one end here. So as it is, power goes over there, in there, and off to that speaker over there, and it just about reaches between the three things. Right, so once I got everything connected up, I then powered it up and I moved my hand in front of the glass doors that promptly opened with a Star Trek-esque swish. So far so good, but then I pressed a button and I was greeted with this. The HiFi wanted me to enter a PIN number. Now this is a new one on me. Just on the off chance I typed in 1234, but no, I was locked out unless I knew the correct PIN. So I went and downloaded the PDF of the manual from the B&O website, and it turns out that you've either got to know the PIN or alternatively contact a B&O retailer for a master code. I assume that costs something. Anyway, I messaged the eBay seller, and fortunately they'd kept a record of this PIN, and after typing that number in, I was good to go. Now the PIN lockout gets reinstated whenever the system has been disconnected from the mains power for over 30 minutes. So to ensure that this did not happen again in the future, I followed the instructions on how to deactivate this feature. Now, I've used plenty of pieces of hi-fi equipment over the years, but at times this one has confused me in a way that none of the others have. Let me just show you what I mean. We'll start off. Let's load a CD in here. So I've got a CD here, YouTube Audio Library Music, Track Tribe, and I put a black mark on the edge there so that we can see when this is rotating. That'll be relevant in a minute. So we want to load this in. Now, normally you'd expect some kind of eject button. There isn't one of those. However, if we just look down, what have we got here? Well, top left of this block of same sized buttons full of text, there's one that says load. So that's the one we're going to press. That opens the top part. Okay, fair enough. We put the CD in. Now, the temptation is to close that lid with your hand in the same way that with a normal CD player, you might just shove the drawer and it closes. Don't do that with this one. That could damage it. You've got to press the load button again. Okay, so we've got the CD loaded in. Now, at this point, in a normal CD player, it would read the information on the CD and come up with the number of tracks, etc., and put it into a state where you're ready to press play, but it wouldn't play it straight away. That's what would normally happen. With this one, well, the CD's in there, but it's not ready. It's not spun it round. I can see from the black mark on the edge here that the CD hasn't moved at all. So we need to get it to read this CD. So what do we do? Well, could press go. That's not going to do it. Well, press CD. Now CD has shown up on the screen there. I'm going to say it's quite difficult to see this information on the camera. I'll put the exposure up quite a bit so that it's legible. It does look better in person. But what we've got here, it says Track Tribe there, or abbreviation of it. That's because I've put that information in earlier on for this particular CD. I'll show you more about that later on. Normally it would just say CD there. It's just because I've named this one and it recognises it. Above there, it's showing the tracks 1 through to 9, and it's flashing number 1. So it's playing it straight away. We can see the CD rotated at the top there. So I press stop, and it's still spinning. Turns out stop isn't stop, stop is pause. Now, if you wait long enough, I think it's like a couple of minutes perhaps, that will eventually stop. So stop does become stop after a while, but it's a pause to start with. In fact, there is no pause button on here. Stop and pause are kind of the same thing. Let's just carry on playing. We'll press go. So this time go plays the CD. So go is play, stop is pause. We want to go to the next track along. Well, clearly that's going to be fast forward, and it is. And that, similarly, that sends us in the other direction. So we want to go to the next track. Well, we've got an up and down here. That's volume, fair enough. I've got no track forward and back buttons. Well, I have. I've got this up and down. So up and down is forward and back. Up takes us forward through the tracks. I mean, I suppose in reality this might be a more sensible way to do it. Up goes up through the numbers. We're up to number 3, up to number 4, and then that goes down to number 3, so you get the idea. Let's just say we want to play this CD in random mode now. So we press random, random lights up on the screen. It's playing track 6. If we go to the next one, it's playing track 2, so nice and random. I like the way the numbers show up on this as well, how the digit of the track you've played gets extinguished. It's worth mentioning though on this that it can only show 14 digits on this display. So if your CD has more than 14 tracks on it, it will then say 14 plus. So I've got a Bob Marley one I put in before and it's got 20 tracks on it, so I just said 14 plus. Let's press random again. We've got on, we've got off. Right, so we're out of random mode now. But how do we get to play the whole CD again? Well, maybe CD all would do that. No, it doesn't. Right, so we're flashing on track 9. If I press go, we're still on track 9, and I want to play the whole CD. How do I do that? Well, it turns out you press number 1, and that takes us back to track 1, and all the numbers light up. So you can see just from that, the CD operation is a little bit different to any other CD player that I've used. No doubt if you've used other Bang & Olufsen ones, this is all probably totally normal. But to me, initially, it's a little bit confusing. Oh, and the final thing, it takes half an hour for this thing to turn itself off. So we could really do with having an off button. So let's have a look through these controls here, see if any of these look like an off button. Well, nothing is immediately obvious. However, that one at the bottom right, it looks like a record button, and it would be if it was on something else. But on this one, it's the off button. Those doors are a little bit annoying after a while. It's a nice little trick to start with, but as you saw there, they will close on you after a certain amount of time if you leave them. And also, just walking past this thing, you'll open the doors up frequently, or if you just put something down on the counter. And there's no way now for me to close the doors if I wanted to close them. I'm just going to wait for it to time out. So let's get back to this thing again. So if we press that now, it's off. Everything's a little bit delayed because of these doors, so we just have to wait perhaps another few seconds. Once those close, hopefully those lights will go out as well. There we go. So that's the power off. But just to give you an idea, if I was just to walk past this thing now, it lights up and comes on again, and you have to wait perhaps 15, 20 seconds or whatever it is for it to close itself up again. It is still off though at the moment. Now you'd think perhaps if I was to press that, that would turn it on. No, that is just an off button. It's not an on as well. So to turn it on, you have to press one of the features, such as the radio that I've got here. And talking of radio, that's another thing that foxed me with this. I mean, I thought I knew how to tune a radio in. I mean, how difficult could it be? If there's like a needle, you tune a knob, or you could perhaps press up and down arrows to move the frequencies. Not with this. No, it turns out with this, what you have to do is you get into the radio mode. If you press the numbers, that just goes to presets that somebody's put in there previously. Of course, the previous owner of this has put their own presets in, no use to me. So I need to tune it in. You'd think I just press up and down arrows or left and right. No, none of that's working. What you have to do is press the setup button 4 times, which then gets you into a mode for tuning in those presets, and you work through a quite convoluted process to get them tuned in. But actually it's not all that bad. Once you know what you're doing, you can even type in the frequency for the radio station, and it's got great reception on FM as well. I had to turn the LED lights off in here, but once I'd done that, brilliant reception. Picked up loads of stations, and then you can save those to the individual presets. But there's no facility in there for just tuning in on a whim. No, what you have to do is you have to set it up initially, spend a bit of time on it, get all your presets in, all the stations that you might want to listen to, and then you're good to go. I mean, it's a different way round of doing things. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not what I was expecting of a radio. So initially I was like, how the heck do you tune this thing in? But once you've got it all set up, once you've spent perhaps only 10 minutes on it, it's fine. You've got all your stations tuned in, one button press away, and as I say, it picks them up excellently and it sounds great as well. But still, I thought I knew how to use radios. I mean, I must have 50 or more in the house, and this is the only one that operates like this. Let's just talk about the price of this unit when it was new. From the revision type number that's on the back of my 3200, it seems like it's quite an early one, but not the first. The price varied over the years, but if we just pick 2004 as its year, it would have cost back then £1,700 new. Now, the speakers I've got, they were sold between 1991 and 2004, and surprisingly, they got cheaper over time. But if we pick out the same 2004 price for them here, then that's going to be another £750. So in total, if I bought all these things in 2004, it would have cost me £2,450, and with inflation, that's £4,225 nowadays, or over 118,000 Sao Tomean dobras. So, not cheap. Now, you might have seen this system, or one very similar to it, with differently coloured speaker grills, and that's because Bang & Olufsen did offer alternative colours as an option. You could buy those from the stores and swap them out yourself to have a system that better matched the rest of your home furnishings. I'll show you how the front of this comes off, so we can also have a look behind here at the drivers. So I'll take that off in a second. I just want to show you something else though. If we just look back here, if you can see down there the green LED on the speaker, of course these are powered speakers. All three things are receiving power, but because we've got the communication between the main unit and the speaker via that DIN plug, this knows when to switch off. If I turn the main unit off now, you'll see that's got a red light on there, so that's now in standby. So rather than having to switch your individual speakers off, you just turn the main unit off and it turns all three things off. So yeah, let's just have a look at this speaker in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to unplug it from the back though, so I can spin it around a bit easier. Okay, I've unplugged the power lead, but I'm leaving the DIN plug connected to this because it's a bit of a devil to get that thing back in there again. It's also difficult to hold this at arm's length because it is very heavy. I mean, I've never lifted up a heavier speaker of this size. We've got this big heatsink on the back here. Of course, this is the amplifier that's with each speaker, so each speaker's got its own separate amplifier. We've got some kind of porting, I think, on the back there. Let's just have a look around the front here. So the grille, you'll notice we've got this edge piece down here, and I was just thinking that you just pull from there and that's going to take the whole thing off. Well, no, don't do that. It's actually the bit inside it. The cloth is recessed inside that section, so what you need to do is, well, really stick a credit card in here, and I'll just try and use my fingernail for the moment. There we go. Right, so I've got the cord off, so let's just unclip it down. These clicking sounds are a little bit worrying because you're thinking you're going to be snapping something off. I haven't done so far, but there's still time yet. And then move along the top and go down the other side as well. So this doesn't actually have any clips on it itself, it's just a piece of cloth. Inside there, the clips are here. We've got a clip there, two at the top and another two at the bottom. So if those get snapped off, they're actually on the main unit, which is a bit of a shame, but they're all right so far. Just looking at that cone there, it looked like it got a bit of a crack on it. I know people say don't touch these things, but look, the amount of speakers, I just wanted to see if that was actually cracked. It isn't cracked, it's just deformed slightly. Okay, so there's the tweeter and the woofer below it. We've got quite a bit of space up at the top here though. That's behind that sort of porting area. You'll notice the whole thing is really tapered from top to bottom. And these things are supposed to be wall mountable. You get a bracket and you can mount the whole thing on your wall, all three components. You certainly need some good wall anchors on that because this whole setup will weigh quite a bit. Now, I mentioned I'd got no experience of using Bang & Olufsen equipment when this thing was new on the market, but I'd formed a bit of an opinion about it without ever having used it. And if anything, this has solidified that opinion in that their priorities seem different to that of other manufacturers. I don't think they disagree with this. If you were to put their priorities in order, I think number one would be the design of the product, the look of it, and then sound quality, that would come in at number two. I mean, for example, if they could make something sound twice as good, but it would be really ugly, I don't think they'd go for that option. So if we put design and then sound quality, but then in at number three, a long way down, I'd put usability, the user interface side of things. I think that's where the least amount of attention has been put into these. If they could throw away a few buttons and make something look nicer and bury the function for those buttons in a menu somewhere that you have to press through various different options to get to, they'd probably go for that. Whereas other manufacturers, they'd go more for the usability of something. The designer of these seems to be the same chap for most of them, and they mention him in the brochures of the time. I feel he was a bit overstretched if he was designing all these products at the same time, that maybe they should have got some kind of user interface team in to help him. I get the feeling he's got, oh, I'll do that, don't worry about it, because he wouldn't want other people messing up his designs by putting bigger buttons on it, or pimples on the button, or spacing things out differently. I mean, on here he's got a lot of uniform size and shape buttons in a grid pattern. Not the most user-friendly interface for something. And the ones on the right have got symbols on some of them which are ambiguous at best. As someone who's used loads of pieces of hi-fi equipment over the years, it meant that I had to resort to downloading and looking at the manual online to figure out how some of the functions of this thing worked. I've used plenty of devices over the years without any problem. This is the first time I've ever had to dig out a manual for a CD and radio. But just to give you an example, we all know what a play button looks like. It's a universal symbol now. It's become standard. If you see a device and you want to get it to play, you press the play button and you know what the play button looks like. Well, this doesn't have a play button on it. I mean, why would it? This has got a go button instead. I've had it for a few days now, and I've realised that the quickest way to get it to play a CD is just to wake it up and press the CD button and wait. And then the lid automatically opens up when it realises there's no CD in there. Pop your CD in, press the go button, closes the lid, and it starts playing the CD straight away. While it's doing that, notice how the glass at the edge here just comes short of where the speaker is. No doubt that's why we've got these extensions on the speaker either side, just to push them out away from the glass doors and keep everything nice and neat. Now, if I want to stop the CD, rather than pressing the stop button, I'd just press the power button here, which is really a standby button because the thing is still on, as you can see from the lights. But that just stops the CD playing straight away rather than putting it in that pause mode. Of course, if you were to jump to one of the other options like the radio, well, the CD would stop playing then as well. So yeah, you'd figure it out. Once you got it in your house and you'd used it for a while, it would all become second nature. Okay, with all these things said, perhaps the most important thing is how does it sound? And on that front, I've got absolutely no complaints. I really do appreciate the sound quality of this thing. It's got a lovely, rich, warm and yet clear and defined tone to it. It just comes across as a really quality piece of hi-fi equipment. I'm terrible at describing the audio side of things, but honestly, it just sounds like a really nice piece of hi-fi equipment. It belies its size. It sounds like something a lot bigger. It sounds like these speakers perhaps are floor standers at times. I don't think you'd get anything else in this kind of size, this form factor, from another manufacturer that would sound as good as this. Often when things end up this size, they tend to cheapen down the components a little bit. Well, on this occasion, it's the other way. Of course, it was a very expensive piece of equipment back in the day, but you can tell that a lot of the money that was paid for this went into its construction and went into the components that are inside this thing, so that the performance of this is excellent as far as the sound quality goes. So yeah, absolutely no issues with that whatsoever. It's a really nice thing to listen to. See, there I go again, I'm rubbish at this. But one thing I'd mention is, if you do go looking for one of these secondhand or something similar to it, well, there's quite a few out there. There's a lot of similar looking models, and this one has a feature on it which the others don't, in that it's capable of storing the contents of 396 CDs on it, not just like the names of them, but actually ripping the CDs to an internal hard drive. Now, I got this one because it had that feature. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Turns out it's probably its least interesting feature, and one that makes it more expensive than some of the others. And if I was looking for one now, I'd look for one with a cassette on it, because this hard drive feature, it's all a bit half-baked. In fact, let me give you a demo. The first thing is, if you want to store your CD with a name attached to it, you have to enter that name yourself, one character at a time, in capitals. There's no CD name lookup facility here, it can't read CD text either, and you're restricted to a maximum of just 8 characters. You also have to be playing the CD as you name it, and if you were to copy it without first naming it, you can't go back and add a name later. You can, however, choose to copy all or just some of the tracks from a CD, and once you choose which of the 4 coloured buttons you want to store the CD under, you then have to pick a position between 1 and 99. It turns out that the previous owner of my system had already used quite a few of the positions. The lowest number left free was 47, so I picked 60 just to make it easier for me to remember later. And it then starts copying in real time as the CD is being played. The audio is stored as 192 kilobits a second MP3. To play back a stored CD, you press the CD mem button to activate this feature. Now, it takes a while for it to initialise, but once it's up and running, selecting individual tracks is pretty much instantaneous. The promotional literature for this device suggests using different colours to differentiate between different genres or the music of different family members. Anyway, once it's up and running, just type in the appropriate position number and the CD that's stored under there will play. One reason I bought this model was in the hope that a previous owner's CD collection was still stored in here, and I wasn't disappointed. You'd probably have to keep a separate book to tell you what was in each of those positions if you wanted to play it back. It really is a little bit early for all this stuff. It's definitely a product of its time, although it was on the market for many years, and that technology would have started to look very old very quickly. And nowadays, it's almost unusable in a way. If you want a CD jukebox hard drive system, well, there's a lot of better options out there than this. So yeah, it's a product of its time. Perhaps that's its least useful feature. Now, whilst it doesn't come with a remote, it is compatible with this remote. I believe this is the B04. It came with my main unit when I got it, and it was working fine initially, but it's been sitting around a while, and I've noticed that the display on here has lost the top of the text. If I go to some of the other options, you might see that's SAT, that's DVD, that's CD, and of course this is a unit that's designed for playing various different components from the Bang & Olufsen range, or operating them I should say. So perhaps overkill for this device, but I think it all still works. If I just move up a track perhaps on the CD, yeah, everything's fine. Now I'm going to have a go in the future at replacing the screen on this, because I had a look online and it seems like a common issue. But I do notice the display on here is also really quite faint, and it makes me wonder whether this is going to have a display issue in the future. Is that display just going to disappear completely? There are some issues with various different Bang & Olufsen pieces of equipment, and I don't know whether it's just that they're very well documented, or they all seem to have some kind of Achilles heel, because most things, when you look at the ones with the Beosound, is it 9000 with the 6 CDs, they all say it's had a new laser, or it needs a new laser, or the motor's been replaced. There's all sorts of various different parts that need replacing. Or is that just because the things are expensive and it's worth replacing the parts? Not too sure. Now, if you're ever thinking about buying a used B&O system, I'd strongly recommend spending quite some time getting familiar with the range before spending any money. There are some very useful website resources out there, and you will need them. Let me just give you a flavour for what you're in for using the information I've learned about these models from the BeoWorld website. Okay, so the one that I've got with a CD, internal hard drive and radio is the Beosound 3200. There was a version of this without the hard drive called the Beosound 3000, and then there was a model with a CD and a cassette. That was the Beosound Overture, but that was only the name in Europe. It was called the Beosound 4000 in the rest of the world, and that was an update to the earlier Beocenter 2500. However, when that model was bundled with the Beolab 2500 speakers that I've got, the whole thing was then known as the Beosystem 2500. Oh, and there's also a CD-only version of that called the Beocenter 2300, and then there was a test run of just 500 with a DAB radio called the Beocenter 2300 DAB. It really is like learning another language, and I can see why I found this all very alien, off-putting, and unwelcoming back in the day. One big benefit with Bang & Olufsen equipment is that because it was expensive back in the day, people repaired it. They didn't just throw it away. And as a result, there's a good repair network out there. There's parts that are still available for a lot of these things. There's still a lot of people that will spend the time and effort to repair old Bang & Olufsen equipment. You can quite easily buy refurbished Bang & Olufsen stuff. There's a lot of shops who will buy your old Bang & Olufsen stuff and then sell it on second hand in a way that you don't get with other manufacturers. So yeah, there's this whole support network around it. And then also there's websites, there's kind of fan sites in a way that have all the information you need about your individual items. And then you've also got the manuals and the old brochures. Bang & Olufsen, whilst it's a bit weird at times, it's also weird in the fact that there's still a lot of support around it, and that is very useful nowadays. And this is too loud and it's doing me head in, so hold on a second. Whew, that's better. So years ago, when we used to walk past that Bang & Olufsen shop, I'd formed an opinion about the stuff being kind of overpriced nonsense, and I don't think it was fair, really. It was expensive, but it wasn't bad quality stuff. It wasn't poor sound quality. It was just completely out of my league. There was no way I could have afforded it. But if at the time I had money coming out my ears, I already had the big house, the sports cars, all the holidays I wanted, and I wanted a small hi-fi to put on the wall in the snooker room, this would have been ideal. I don't think I would have had any complaints at all about the sound quality. And if I had got one of these in 2004, I would have ripped my CDs to it 10 years before I got my Sony HAP S1, which now stores all the contents of my old CDs. So yeah, it was innovative in its way, but certainly I wouldn't bother thinking about that hard drive side of things nowadays. Look for one of the cheaper models with a cassette deck in. You're going to get the same kind of sound quality, the same kind of form factor, but you're not going to have that feature on it that you'll never use, and maybe it's a good way to play your old cassettes as well. So yeah, I like this. I've got caveats, but overall, yeah, very nice. It's not like I wish I'd have played around with Bang & Olufsen stuff any earlier, but now that I've finally got to use some of it properly, yeah, I like this one. Now, I did get another one as well. I've stored that away in my locker. That one can play cassettes, and we'll have a look at that sometime in the future. It's a little bit cheaper than this one as well. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.